Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian talk show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and our esteemed guest for today is Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Oh, thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
Yeah, I would like to start with a really important news what may affect Ukraine and all world as well. This is yesterday debates between.
What debate?
Uh, yeah, you hit it on.
That 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 was not a debate. That was an execution.
That was execution, and the execution was largely self-inflicted by Democrats. And there is an opinion that Democrats knew well what Biden inability or his limitations. I'm trying to be very diplomatic in that case, what they are, and they were hiding it so far. I don't agree 100% with that notion, simply because we've heard 3.5 months ago State of the Union address, although it's a very different format from the debates, but
Correct.
still the difference. I mean, could the man age in 3 months as much as to be one person in State of the Union and then completely different person 3 months later?
Well,
What do you think?
if in fact, let's assume if in fact he has dementia, if it is different people coping with dementia, if in fact that is what it is, the different people decline at different rates.
True.
It is not the same rate of decline for all people. It is
Absolutely.
quite possible that the rate of decline in President Biden's performance had accelerated. The rate of decline had accelerated in recent months, and they simply couldn't stop it.
So the only I would give credit to Democrats by calling this debate so early. They didn't have to do it at all,
No,
but they knew in an inner cycle, they knew Biden's very serious limitations, and they wanted to see whether he can somehow brilliantly cover all that on a public stage in front of the cameras and so on, or he cannot do it. And if he cannot do it, then they still have enough time before their convention in August, replace him and to get somebody else. I don't know. I don't know.
in effect, that would be a damage limitation strategy. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't. It does not. It doesn't. Replacing President Biden with another candidate at the convention does not guarantee them victory in November, simply
absolutely.
but it might, in the best possible case, limit some of the damage, the political fallout on uh, on races at lower levels. It might limit the extent of what it could well be a Republican strategic victory in November, where they recover not only the presidency, but strengthen their lead in the House and gain control of the Senate. And you have a completely conservative Republican administration going into 2025. And that's depending upon your point of view. That's either a very good thing, or if you're on the left, that's a very bad thing. So that
Uh,
you could tell by the virtual panic mode that many of the mainstream media, which tends to lean very much to the left, with the exception of Fox News, that they were in genuine panic and fearful for. And I suggest that their fears are needless, because the Republicans traditionally are not a party that engages in widespread political purges or vindictiveness, even when they are in total control or in power. So I would say that their fears are groundless. Their fears of losing power are well founded.
well said, Jonathan. I'll tell you that obviously, the way it looked yesterday, Democratic Party cannot put him as a candidate on re-election. Not even the point that he will lose it. Even if he will win it, how you accept that 80 by the end of the term, 86 years old man Even today, he's not in full control of his facilities, but in 4 years from now, it will be a complete disaster. Nobody can allow that to happen. So they
Now,
have to replace him with some reasonable choice and just
now,
go with it.
yeah. Now, what this does, the effect that this has on the current conflict in Ukraine is quite simple. It tells the Ukrainians, okay, now that we are seeing that a Trump presidency in November is increasingly likely and as close to certain as you can imagine, we now have to we have if we wish to take our destiny into our own hands and take this issue off the table and make it irrelevant, make the November election irrelevant, the Ukrainians must look for the decisive moment to engage in and go against what the conventional wisdom is saying. A lot of your conventional military analysts are saying, oh no, victory for Ukraine over Russia is not possible. You, despite the fact that there are a number of qualitative and quantitative factors that have been moving in Ukraine's favor throughout the past year. So, and the fact that the Crimea is increasingly becoming the most obvious center of gravity for this entire conflict. And the indications that are moving in Ukraine's favor are making it possible, in my opinion, my estimation, to enable Ukraine to inflict a decisive operational defeat on Russian forces by decisively cutting off logistical resupply and reinforcement to the Crimean Peninsula. Once that occurs, then they will be easily able to commit their strategic reserves to retaking the Crimea, forcing the Russian occupation forces that will now be cut off to surrender. That will be a decisive operational victory for Ukraine. It will lay bare the Russian weakness and utter failure to reconquer Ukraine. And this will be a decisive moment for the Western powers to unite in putting pressure on Russia to say, okay, you failed. You're not going to occupy Ukraine. You are not going to threaten any other NATO members. Your nuclear arsenal is a bluff, and we are calling your bluff. And we are saying it is time for you to cut your losses, withdraw from Ukraine, cease fire, call it a day. And that moment is, in my opinion, coming more rapidly than many people suspect. And the fact that the results of last night's debate will have a salutary effect, I estimate, on the entire. And now it makes very clear for Ukraine what the political situation is likely to be in November. And interestingly enough, that puts pressure on all of the other NATO members who are recognizing their own self-interest in defeating Russia now and not having to rely excessively on the United States continuing to supply enormous amounts of aid. They will, which is what former President Trump wants. He wants Ukraine members to pony up more of their full share in support of the Ukrainian war. So, from it, I don't believe that former President Trump if he wins in November, will withdraw from NATO. He will simply be asking NATO to provide more of your fair share, and we will do the same. And so that will be an all-around good thing for Ukraine. And this lays the groundwork under the correct circumstances if we have a more enlightened Defense Department leadership that is willing to engage in a strategy of asymmetric response by shifting spending from nuclear forces to the upgrading of our ballistic missile defense forces and upgrading the U.S. Space Force fleet with a space fleet to create that worldwide system of worldwide strategic defense matrix, WISDOM, moving from mutually assured destruction paradigm to the worldwide strategic defense matrix paradigm, from MAD to WISDOM, symbolic and real.
Jonathan, I was thinking about that Ukrainian foreign politics. In the case of the United States, they were very pro-Biden centric policy rather than overall American policy. They were too much concentrated on having a good relationship with Biden and his administration, and so on and on.
I suspect they may start backpedaling on that.
They
Start hedging their bets.
maybe they already started. Hopefully,
I think that probably started as soon as they were watching the debate, and as soon as
absolutely.
as soon as President Biden was having those severe mental pauses during the debate, is that looks like we better recalculate and recalibrate our contributions or our degree of friendship with.
Look, I don't want to even go to discuss the merits of what Trump says and what Biden said. It's a delivery that killed Biden and his chances. And I think that Biden, by Monday, the latest, he has to really say, enough is enough. I had a fantastic life, career, and I've done everything to serve United States of America. But what I said.
There's no gas left in the tank.
Yeah, it's I get it from one of the books about chess grandmasters, and one of them said that regardless how hard you practice and you learn new openings and positions and so on, at the end of the day, we all lose to one incredibly powerful opponent. And you know what's the name of that opponent? Time. We are all going to lose to Mr. Time. And Biden,
as one theologian, Christian theologian, put it, that from the moment of our birth until the moment of our death, we are all involved. All of humanity is involved in a race with death. It looms of the entirety of our lives. But the only problem is, man races death, but it is the final moment which decides, and the last moment is death. Man races death, but death always wins.
And there is nothing wrong with death. It's a part of life. If there wouldn't be death, there wouldn't be a life either. So,
and if you're a Christian, as I am, you look at death differently. Death is not a finish line. Death is a doorway between this life and the life hereafter.
Okay, well,
looking at it.
Now, from the Ukrainian point of view, Trump, in my opinion, he never been the greatest friend of Ukraine, or Mr. Zelensky in particular. We're coming to his first impeachment issue and many others. But yesterday, he mentioned several times that how much money the United States spent on Ukraine and other endeavors. And so what I'm a little bit afraid is that Ukrainians, as a result of yesterday's debate, they will become so disappointed that they would think that, okay, yeah, we can attack now Russians, maybe take Crimea or half Crimea or so on, and where it all leads us when Trump will become president in November, he will stop any help to Ukraine, and Russia will regroup and will come back at us and retake Crimea, and then they will retake all other cities and, God forbid, Kiev. So maybe at that time it's better to just keep active defense all over all the front lines, and wait and see. Maybe there will be some peaceful activities, maybe there will be something else. That knowing Ukrainian mentality, and they have very fast swing moods. They can go from incredible optimism and so on, they can go to right down pessimism very quickly. And this is what I'm wondering will happen in the next few days. What do you think, John?
I think that the Ukrainians, being also eminently practical people and willing to take advantage of whatever opportunities present themselves, after all, they have consistently exceeded expectations in this conflict from the very beginning. And so I would estimate that I continue to assert that the Ukrainians, now recognizing the political situation that is emerging in the United States, will say, okay, we have a window of opportunity here, and we have to make the most of it. We have to time our counteroffensive, our counterpunch in both timing and place to make it as the effect as politically decisive as possible. That means achieving an operational victory in Crimea, cutting it off and negating the illegal annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2014. So, if, to me, their strategic calculus is now very clear. They have to take advantage of their window. Much as I would reckon that the situation, if we use the American Civil War as an analogy, the Confederacy recognized that their only real opportunity to achieve independence from the Union was they had to be, in effect, duplicate what happened in the American Revolution. When the American Revolution, the colonists were able to inflict a decisive enough defeat on British forces to trigger British and French, to trigger French intervention in the American Revolutionary War. In the case of the American Civil War, whether the Confederates were hoping to trigger both British and French intervention on the part of the Confederacy by inflicting a decisive military defeat on Union forces. They weren't going to do it by simply achieving defensive victories on Confederate territory. They had to, in order to have a chance of winning the American Civil War, inflict a decisive operational defeat on Union territory. That was the rationale behind the Battle of Antietam in Maryland in 1862 and in the subsequent Battle of Gettysburg in 1863. Both were attempts by the Confederacy to achieve a political strategic victory through British and French intervention, and that would be triggered by a decisive and visible military victory for Confederate forces on Union territory. So here you have a situation presenting itself for Ukraine. If we are going to decisively defeat Russia and consolidate military and political support of NATO behind us, we have to achieve a visible, clear, and unmistakable military victory over Russian forces. And it has to be done not by attrition in the eastern portion of Ukraine. That would not be as clearly visible or decisive. But if you do so in Crimea, which is a very clear center of gravity for this conflict, and if you do so in a manner which makes it impossible for the Russians to recover from it, the Russians have already experienced extensive losses in this war, and they cannot afford the loss of Crimea. Yeah, but the Ukrainians are increasingly in a position where they can force this outcome, force the Russians into what in chess you would call zugzwang,
Mhm.
forced move.
Yeah.
It's a losing move, but it's a forced one, and one that which the Russians cannot avoid. So this is the reason why now the conflict, the war, is coming down to this decisive center of gravity, the struggle for the center of gravity in this war, which is the Crimean Peninsula. And now the window of opportunity has been made very clear. That they have the Ukrainians now can see that they have really until the November election, and arguably, okay, the intervening period between the election results and the formal accession of a presumably conservative Republican administration in 2025, they have that window in which to achieve the decisive operational victory that they need. And my opinion is it would be more decisive and more effective if they achieve it at least by the end of the summer, so to allow the after effects to take effect.
Jonathan, you remember last summer when everybody expected the Ukrainian attack, and at that time the General Zaluzhny, he ruled against it. He never publicly said that, but he was preferring like small attacks in different places here and there and so on. And finally, later on, maybe a few months later, he said that it was an interview to The Economist and I think New York Times, perhaps, I don't remember exactly. He said that with the lack of um, the cover from the air without the flying machines, the planes, it would be extremely difficult to hope for success. And all NATO doctrine rules that before you start the ground attack, you have to have superiority in the air. And of course, Ukraine didn't have that at the time. So his priority number one was um, to safeguard the Ukrainian army. And to do that, he ruled out the front attack, and he did what he did. Of course, there was a lot of criticism. There were consequences. There were several months that there was almost no help from the United States. Although you can arguably say that it's because of the Congress fights and so on. Okay, could be, but still, there was a valid point saying, okay, so we're already send them billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, if you will. And what did you achieve for that? What are the results? Why are you sending so much money? And what is the result? They might as well make a peace, and so we don't have to spend all this money. Okay, we will spend some money for reconstruction, but that's a different purpose at all. Now, if we're coming to this summer, what's in your opinion difference this summer versus last summer that Ukrainian will start an attack and it will be a successful one?
The difference between this summer and last summer is that now the Ukrainians are acquiring more and more of the decisive technical means in several areas with which to achieve qualitative superiority over numerically superior Russian forces, which they did not have last year. Now you have the opportunity to acquire elements of air power, such as F-16s and other aircraft, coming in from various NATO members, various types of aid coming in from various NATO members, which it's a challenge for the Ukrainians to successfully integrate all of this aid into their forces. And in some cases, switching over from their older Soviet equipment, which they still have some of, in order to more fully standardize their equipment with what NATO is able to provide. And this is becoming increasingly important for the Ukrainians. So now you have a situation where the Ukrainian military is becoming qualitatively superior to its Russian counterpart. And the Russian, for example, the Russian advantage in artillery, which at first was, they said 7-1. Now that some analysts are saying the Russian superiority has decreased to 3-1.
Yes,
which is, and that's not a good trend, and that's certainly for Russia, and it's not going to enable them to successfully prosecute further offensives on the Ukrainian front. And moreover, their situation is even worse within the Crimean Peninsula itself, where they are not able to really reinforce or resupply. And those Russian occupation forces, as a result, are becoming steadily weaker relative to their Ukrainian counterparts. So now you have an opportunity with still uncommitted Ukrainian strategic reserves. Once the qualitative superiority has made itself fully evident in Ukraine, the Ukrainians will have the opportunity at a time and place of their choosing, which they will keep very much to themselves, as they should. They execute that successful counteroffensive. The Russian resistance in Crimea collapses, and then that not only gives them a significant political victory, but it also will enable the Ukrainians to pivot and switch their reserves to the eastern portion of Ukraine to further reinforce and enable them to engage in counteroffensive operations against Russian military forces. And as the aircraft continue to arrive and the qualitative superiority continues to increase, Ukraine will eventually gain air superiority over eastern Ukraine. In addition to the continued deep strikes with ATACMS and other types of deep strike weapons against Russian rear areas and logistics, this cumulative effect is going to lead to a rapid disintegration of Russian military forces vis-a-vis Ukraine. And that at that point, the Russians have to, barring complete insanity on the part of Putin, uh, basically, cut their losses, state as they say, all right, we have achieved the purposes of our special military operation. We're declaring victory and going home. So, and they'll probably have there to say to the Ukrainians, we hope that you have learned your lesson.
But Jonathan, based on yesterday's debates, don't you think that Russians may rethink their policy towards Ukraine in the next 3 4 months, whatever is left until election? Because obviously that Trump would win, so then Russians who are losing 1,000+ people every day, maybe they will decide, okay, so why do we have to fight and lose 1,000 men a day when we can just wait for another 3 4 months? There will be election. Trump will become president. Actually, in some Russian publications, they called him our president. So who is
Big mistake.
yeah? Who is Putin then?
Big mistake, because they forget that President Trump's motto is America first. It does not mean Russia first. Yeah, putting America first means Russia is not even second. They're way down the list of priorities.
Yeah.
And so that for Russians to believe that somehow Trump being elected president in November is going to be in any way favorable for them is a huge miscalculation.
It's not even so much favorable to Russia, but if indeed Trump will, let's say, he would cut military help to Ukraine, or will try to move both Russia and Ukraine to the negotiating table, or whatever.
Or what is more likely for President Trump to do, a President Trump in the second term to do, would be to say to the NATO partners, okay, we can finish this on terms very favorable to NATO, assuming that you all continue to partner to give your fair share, your agreed upon share of spending of military GDP, percentage of GDP, to the support of Ukraine. We will do our part, but you all have to do your part as well. And if we have a consolidated response, a coherent response, then we have a very realistic chance of achieving a lasting peace in Ukraine and establishing Ukraine as the eastern bulwark of NATO.
It's all logical, and John, I really hope that something good will come out of it for Ukraine. In the meantime, Ukraine has to understand that the Ukrainian fight for freedom, it's Ukrainian fight. It could be helped, and it is helped by many other nations besides the United States. And by the way, as a result of the Ukrainian war, if not all, most of the NATO countries, they do spend 2% and more. So it's not an issue that it was 4, 5, 6 years ago. Now it's a different situation. So I think
the NATO members have collectively learned the lessons of World War II. They saw what happened when the West failed to respond decisively to Nazi aggression. And now they realize what is likely to happen should NATO members fail to respond decisively to Russian aggression in Ukraine and defeat it now. Defeat it now.
Putin didn't help himself a lot by having the trip to North Korea and signing a treaty with North Korea, which is obviously the number one target of the treaty is United States. They want to develop a missile that could fly to the east coast of the United States. Maybe it's years away until they will have such a weapon, but still, then where is the friendship of Trump and Putin? Where is that?
For example, a President Trump in his second term could easily anticipate such a move and negate it by establishing what I've been recommending, the establishment of that worldwide strategic defense matrix in conjunction with NATO allies, and upgrading his favorite space force, upgrading it with a space fleet, which can accomplish several planetary defense missions, as well as create that worldwide strategic defense matrix, which would negate the nuclear arsenals of Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. And transform the greater problem of worldwide nuclear war to a much lesser problem by successfully negating nuclear missile arsenals.
And as Ukraine is concerned, one point is that even there would be some kind of I don't believe in peace treaty, but at least the ceasefire of some kind.
An armistice.
Armistice. Okay.
An armistice would be sufficient. Simply the type of armistice that exists, for example, between North and South Korea.
Right.
That has successfully existed. Not a formal peace treaty, because North Korea is totally unwilling to accept any kind of permanent codification of the status of North Korea and South Korea. But still, it has worked ever since that armistice was concluded in 1953, and so now we'd have the same. It would not be a perfect result to have an armistice, but it would be an acceptable and sustainable result, one which could allow Ukraine to become a member of NATO and to join the European Union, and basically to solidify the defenses of NATO and Western Europe for the remainder of the 21st century, I would suggest.
Absolutely. And then there is a point to continue to have a military build-up in Ukraine, so Russia will not be tempted to attack in not even in 2 years, in 6 months, rather. So Ukraine really has to be on the lookout. But in the meantime, we'll see what next few weeks will provide us with. Hopefully,
it says my money. You and I have a gentleman's bet. Essentially, I am saying that by September, at least by September, Ukraine will have selected its moment before then to engage in its decisive counteroffensive. They say that they will have the aircraft that they need this summer, and they're acquiring other weapons, which are increasing the qualitative advantage that Ukraine has over its Russian opponent. So I'm looking for the Ukrainians to choose the moment and throw that decisive counterpunch.
Exactly. And, I wouldn't rule out even possibilities that Ukrainians are already getting the airplanes. They're trying to not publicize this.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure that at least few of them, I don't think that they have 200 of F-16s, but few of them they must already have.
Well, once you introduce those F-16s and those other types of aircraft, it makes sense that you want to introduce them all at once in decisive numbers. For example, the Germans, when they in World War II, when they introduced the Me-262, the first jet fighter aircraft, that it definitely surprised the Allies, but it was too late. It was after the Allies had effectively gained air superiority over the Normandy beachhead, and the Me-262s, the jet fighters, although they were an annoyance and they were a problem the Allies had to contend, it was too late. It was too little.
Too late.
Too little, too late.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully Ukraine will get, or maybe already getting that, and hopefully we will learn in the next couple of weeks that it's been confirmed. In the meantime, Jonathan, thank you so much for today's program, and we'll see you same place, same time on Tuesday. Have
Excellent.
A great weekend.
You do the same.
Glory to Ukraine. Thank you very much.